This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. We are coming on the air because President-elect Donald Trump has just been sentenced for his conviction in the criminal hush money case in New York, making him the first American president to be sentenced for a crime. This comes just 10 days before he takes the oath of office. Now he will return to the White House as a convicted felon. Let's get straight to our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Aaron, Trump fought to the bitter end to prevent this sentencing from happening. He hoped the Supreme Court would save him, too. Clearly, that didn't happen. You were in the courtroom. How powerful were Judge Merchan's words to Trump?
Okay, so imagine this. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is staring down the possibility of actual jail time. Not some political talking point. Not some theoretical consequence down the road. We're talking about a sitting former president facing contempt charges that could put him behind bars while the entire political establishment watches in real time. This is happening right now, and the shockwaves are already tearing through Capitol Hill like nothing we've seen in modern American history. Think about what that means for a second. We've had presidents impeached. We've had presidents resign in disgrace. But we've never had a former president facing immediate incarceration while simultaneously running for office again. The tension on Capitol Hill is absolutely electric, and what happens in the next few weeks could reshape American politics for generations. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, a completely free newsletter that cuts through the noise and gives you the real story behind what's happening in Washington. No spin, no agenda. Just facts and analysis you need to understand what's really going on. Just click the link in the description to join thousands of others who are staying informed. All right, let's get back to the video. Now, here's what's actually happening on the ground. According to multiple reports from Reuters and the Washington Post, Trump is facing contempt of court charges stemming from his repeated violations of a gag order in his ongoing federal case. But this isn't just about Trump saying something controversial on social media. This is about a federal judge, Judge Tanya Chutkan, reaching the absolute limit of her patience after Trump has violated court orders more than 10 separate times. Think about that number. 10 times, that's not a slip-up. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern of deliberate defiance of the judicial system. Judge Chutkan, who was appointed by President Barack Obama, has been presiding over one of Trump's most significant legal battles, and she's made it crystal clear that nobody, not even a former president, is above the law. The gag order was put in place to prevent Trump from intimidating witnesses, attacking court staff, and prejudicing potential jurors. Standard stuff in high-profile cases. But Trump has treated these restrictions like suggestions rather than legal requirements. He's posted on Truth Social attacking prosecutors. He's called the judge biased at rallies. He's gone after witnesses by name in interviews. Each violation has pushed the court closer to this breaking point. And now we're here. Capitol Hill is watching because this isn't just a legal matter anymore. This is a constitutional crisis in the making. You've got Republican lawmakers scrambling to defend Trump, calling this judicial overreach and political persecution. You've got Democrats saying this proves that Trump thinks he's untouchable. And you've got legal experts across the spectrum saying that if Judge Chutkan doesn't enforce consequences now, it sets a precedent that could undermine the entire judicial system. The practical question everyone's asking is simple. Can a judge actually send Donald Trump to jail for contempt? And the answer, according to every legal expert we've consulted, is yes, absolutely yes. Okay, let me explain exactly how contempt of court works, because this is where it gets really important to understand the mechanics. Contempt of court comes in two flavors: civil contempt and criminal contempt. Civil contempt is designed to compel compliance. It's the court saying, do what I told you to do or face consequences until you do it. Criminal contempt, on the other hand, is punishment for past behavior. It's the court saying, you deliberately defied my order, and now you're going to pay for it. In Trump's case, legal analysts believe Judge Chutkan could pursue criminal contempt charges because the violations have been willful and repeated. According to NPR's legal correspondent, criminal contempt can result in fines and jail time, and there's no maximum limit spelled out in federal law for how long someone can be held. Now, practically speaking, judges typically don't jump straight to incarceration. They usually start with warnings, then fines, then maybe house arrest or limited detention. But here's where Trump's situation is different. He's already been warned multiple times. He's already been fined, The fines haven't stopped the behavior. So what's left? The nuclear option: actual jail time. Legal experts at Georgetown Law have pointed out that judges have wide discretion in contempt cases precisely because the integrity of the judicial process depends on parties respecting court orders. If a defendant can just ignore a judge's orders and pay some fines without changing behavior, then the court has no real authority. Think about what that means for the rule of law. Judge Chuckin is facing a calculation that no judge wants to face. If she doesn't enforce real consequences, she's essentially telling every future defendant that gag orders are optional if you're rich or powerful enough. But if she does jail Trump, even for a short period, she'll be accused of political bias, face potential threats to her safety, and become the center of a political firestorm that makes everything we've seen so far look tame. The Washington Post reported that Chuckin has already received death threats related to this case. Her personal security has been increased, and she's fully aware that whatever decision she makes will be weaponized politically. But according to sources close to the court proceedings, she's also deeply committed to the principle that judicial orders must be respected, regardless of who the defendant is. The practical impact is already being felt across Washington. Republican leadership is in emergency meetings trying to figure out how to respond if Trump is actually jailed. Do they rally around him and call it persecution? Do they distance themselves and risk alienating his base? Do they try to thread some impossible needle where they support Trump but also respect the courts? Speaker Mike Johnson has already gone on record saying that any attempt to jail Trump would be seen as election interference, a direct attack on democracy itself. But here's the problem with that argument. If respecting court orders is election interference, then you're essentially saying that candidates should be immune from legal consequences while running for office. That's not how the system works. That's not how it's ever worked. Meanwhile, Democrats are being equally careful about how they respond. President Biden has remained conspicuously silent on the matter, likely because anything he says will be spun as political interference with the judicial process. But behind the scenes, according to sources who spoke with Politico, the administration is preparing for the possibility of widespread protests and civil unrest if Trump is jailed. The Department of Homeland Security has been running scenarios. The Secret Service has been updating protocols for protecting a former president in custody. This is real. This is happening. And the consequences extend far beyond Trump himself. Think about what this means for future presidents. If Trump goes to jail for contempt, it establishes that former presidents can face immediate incarceration for violating court orders. That's a precedent that will outlast Trump's legal troubles and potentially affect every president who comes after him. It's also forcing a conversation about presidential immunity that we've been avoiding for too long. Trump's lawyers have argued that as a former president, he deserves special considerations that ordinary defendants don't get. But Judge Chuckin has consistently rejected that argument, stating in court filings that the defendant's former position does not give him carte blanche to vilify public servants who are simply doing their jobs. All right, let's break down what actually matters here, because there's a lot of noise and we need to cut through to the core issues. Point number one, this is fundamentally about whether the judicial system can function when a defendant has massive political power and a platform to reach millions of people instantly. Every single day that Trump violates the gag order, he's testing whether courts have any real authority over powerful individuals. Judge Chuckin isn't just dealing with one defendant in one case. She's defending the principle that court orders mean something. Think about it from her perspective. She issues an order. Trump violates it. She warns him. He violates it again. She fines him. He pays the fine and violates it again. At what point does the court lose all credibility if it doesn't escalate to real consequences? Legal scholars have pointed out that this exact scenario is what contempt power was designed for. It's the court's last resort to maintain its authority when all other measures have failed. And we're there now. We've exhausted the other measures. According to analysis from the Brennan Center for Justice, if Judge Chuckin backs down now, it could embolden defendants in future high-profile cases to simply ignore gag orders, knowing that the worst they'll face is a financial penalty. For someone like Trump, who's raised hundreds of millions from his legal troubles, fines are just the cost of doing business. They're not a deterrent. They're a line item. So the question becomes, does the court have any tool left besides incarceration? And the answer appears to be no. Second point, the political ramifications of jailing Trump are absolutely massive, and we need to be realistic about what's coming. If Trump spends even one night in jail, his campaign will turn it into the single most powerful fundraising and mobilization tool in modern political history. His supporters will see it as absolute proof that the system is rigged against him. His base will become even more energized and potentially more extreme in their rhetoric and actions. According to polling data from multiple sources, a significant portion of Trump's supporters already believe that the legal system is being weaponized against him for political reasons. If he's jailed, that belief will harden into absolute conviction. We're talking about tens of millions of Americans who will view this as a political prisoner situation, regardless of the legal facts. The comparison to countries with politicized justice systems will be everywhere. Trump himself will absolutely lean into that narrative. He's already calling himself a political prisoner in his fundraising emails. Imagine what the messaging becomes when there are actual photos of him in custody. But here's the flip side that nobody wants to talk about. If Trump is not jailed despite repeated, willful violations of court orders, a different portion of the country will lose faith in the justice system for the opposite reason. They'll believe that Trump is getting special treatment because of his wealth and political power, that he's literally above the law, that there are two systems of justice in America, one for the powerful and one for everyone else. According to surveys conducted by the Pew Research Center, trust in American institutions is already at historic lows. This situation has the potential to drive that trust even lower, regardless of which way it goes. That's the impossible position Judge Chutkan is in. Either decision damages public faith in the system, just in different ways and with different constituencies. Third point, we need to talk about the actual logistics of jailing a former president, because this isn't simple and the complications are enormous. Trump is protected by the Secret Service for life. That protection doesn't end if he's held in contempt. So you'd have a situation where Secret Service agents would need to be present in a detention facility, maintaining security for someone who's simultaneously being punished by the legal system. According to former Secret Service officials who spoke with CNN, there's no existing protocol for this scenario. It's never happened before. They'd need to essentially create a secure facility within a facility or designate a specific location that can accommodate both detention and protection requirements. Some legal experts have suggested that Trump might be held in a federal courthouse holding cell rather than a traditional jail, precisely because of these security complications. Others have proposed house arrest with electronic monitoring as a middle ground that maintains the contempt sanction while avoiding the logistical nightmare of traditional incarceration. But Judge Chutkan has to balance those practical concerns against the legal principle at stake. If she opts for house arrest instead of jail specifically because Trump is a former president with Secret Service protection, is she giving him special treatment? Is she acknowledging that he's different from other defendants? And if she does that, hasn't she undermined the very principle she's trying to uphold? The Washington Post spoke with several former federal judges about this exact dilemma, and the consensus was that there's no good answer. Every option has problems. Every decision will be criticized, and whatever happens will set a precedent that the country hasn't had to grapple with before. Point number 4, this situation is happening against the backdrop of Trump's presidential campaign, and that timing is absolutely critical to understanding the stakes. Trump is currently the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. He's leading in most polls. He's raised more money than his competitors, and he's built his entire campaign narrative around being persecuted by a corrupt system. If he's jailed for contempt, even briefly, it feeds directly into that narrative in the most powerful way possible. His campaign will use images of him in custody in every ad, every fundraising email, every rally speech from now until the election. According to political strategists from both parties who spoke with Politico, the visual of Trump being led into custody could become the defining image of the entire election cycle. It would dominate news coverage for weeks. It would energize his base beyond anything we've seen, and it would force every other Republican candidate to take a position on whether they support jailing him or not. But here's what's not being talked about enough. This also forces Republican voters to confront a question they've been avoiding. Do they want a nominee who might be in jail during the general election campaign? Do they want to risk nominating someone who could be facing ongoing legal consequences while trying to win a presidential race? According to focus groups conducted by Republican polling firms, there's a slice of Republican voters, maybe 10 to 15%, who support Trump but have concerns about his legal issues. Those voters might be fine with him fighting the charges. They might even think the charges are politically motivated, but they also want to win the election and they're starting to worry that Trump's legal problems make him unelectable in a general election. If Trump goes to jail even briefly, it could push some of those voters toward other candidates, or it could do the opposite and convince them that the system really is rigged and Trump is the only one willing to fight it. We don't know yet which way it breaks. But the timing means this contempt issue isn't just a legal matter. It's potentially the most important factor in the Republican primary race. Now, let's put this in historical context because we need to understand just how unprecedented this moment really is. The closest comparison in American history is probably United States versus Nixon, the case that led to President Richard Nixon's resignation. But even that's not quite the same. Nixon was facing the possibility of impeachment and criminal prosecution, but he resigned before any of that happened. He was never actually jailed. He was never held in contempt. He left office and received a pardon from Gerald Ford. We've also had presidents impeached. Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton were both impeached by the House, but neither faced criminal charges while in office or after. Donald Trump himself was impeached twice, but again, those were political processes, not criminal proceedings. Legal experts are calling this moment truly unprecedented because it combines elements we've never seen together before. You have a former president who's running for office again, facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, and now potentially facing immediate incarceration for contempt of court. According to constitutional scholars at Harvard Law School, there's simply no roadmap for this. The founders never imagined a scenario quite like this. They built an impeachment as a remedy for presidential misconduct. They assumed that former presidents would return to private life and could then face legal consequences like any other citizen. But they didn't anticipate someone leaving office, immediately running again, and using their ongoing political campaign as both a legal defense and a fundraising mechanism built on their legal troubles. Some historians have compared this moment to the period just before the Civil War, when the country was grappling with fundamental questions about the rule of law and who it applied to. That might sound extreme, but think about what's at stake. We're testing whether political power can override judicial authority. We're testing whether someone can use their platform and their base to intimidate the legal system into backing down. We're testing whether there's any consequence that can actually deter someone who views every legal action as a political attack to be converted into campaign fuel. This is comparable to the crisis moments that have defined American democracy at various points in history. And just like those moments, the decisions made right now will echo for decades. So what happens next? Think about what could happen over the next few weeks because the timeline is actually very compressed. Judge Chutkan is expected to rule on the contempt motion within days, not weeks. She's been signaling in recent hearings that her patience is exhausted and that she views Trump's continued violations as a direct challenge to her authority and the court's authority. If she rules that Trump is in contempt, the next question is what sanction she imposes. Legal experts believe she might start with a brief period of incarceration, maybe 24 to 48 hours, to make the point without creating an extended crisis. The idea would be to show that she's serious, that court orders must be respected, but also to minimize the political and logistical complications of a longer detention. But here's the thing, even 24 hours of Trump in custody would be an absolute earthquake. The news coverage would be wall to wall. The political reaction would be intense. And there's a very real possibility of protests, both from Trump supporters who view it as persecution and from Trump opponents who want to see accountability. The Department of Homeland Security is reportedly preparing for various scenarios, including the possibility of demonstrations at courthouses, federal buildings, and even potential violence from extremist groups who have already shown a willingness to act on Trump's behalf. Remember January 6th. Remember that there are people who have already demonstrated that they'll take action based on what they believe is happening to Trump. Now imagine the messaging when Trump is actually in custody. According to threat assessment analysts who spoke with NBC News, the risk level is substantial. Beyond the immediate question of contempt, this is all happening while Trump's other cases are moving forward. He's facing charges in Georgia related to election interference. He's facing federal charges related to classified documents. He's facing charges in New York related to business records. Every single one of those cases has the potential to result in conviction and prison time. So this contempt issue might just be the first time we see Trump in custody, not the last. Think about what that means for the 2024 election. You could have a situation where the Republican frontrunner is literally campaigning from jail or under house arrest, where rally speeches are given via video from a detention facility, where the entire election becomes a referendum on whether Trump is a political prisoner or a criminal who's finally facing consequences. Here's why this matters for everyone, not just Trump supporters or Trump opponents. The health of American democracy depends on several key principles. One is that no one is above the law. Another is that the judicial system operates independently from political pressure. Another is that elections are decided by voters, not by courts or prosecutors. Right now, all three of those principles are in tension. If Trump is jailed, his supporters will say the courts are interfering with an election. If he's not jailed despite repeated violations, his opponents will say he's above the law, and regardless of what happens, nearly half the country is likely to believe that the judicial system is compromised in one direction or the other. That's the crisis we're facing. It's not just about Trump. It's about whether the country can maintain faith in its institutions when those institutions are forced to make decisions that will inevitably be seen as political by huge segments of the population. This is the moment that will define not just the 2024 election, but the relationship between political power and legal accountability in America for years to come. We're watching in real time as the system gets tested in ways it's never been tested before. The decisions made in the next few days and weeks will set precedents that outlast any individual politician or any single case. Stay tuned, because what happens on Capitol Hill and in Judge Chuckin's courtroom is going to shape American politics in ways we're only beginning to understand. This is what's at stake. This is why every American, regardless of their political views, needs to be paying attention right now. The next few months are going to be critical, and the consequences of what we're seeing unfold will be with us for a generation. This is history happening, and we're all witnesses to it.